Hello, everybody. I'm your host, Zenitsu, and you're listening to the Digi Talks podcast, the show that covers various topics from news to meta developments and everything in between for the fine folks who love the Digimon trading card game. Just as a quick reminder, I do stream this live over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu. It's also uploaded as a YouTube video under the channel of Zenitsu, on top of being on various podcasting platforms like Spotify for your viewing and listening pleasure. Please feel free to leave a like, rating, follow, subscribe, and review depending on the platform that you're listening on. It really does help. Today, I am back with Team Blank, and right now we have Headless and Guardian. Nikki is unable to make it this time, and we are going to be talking about if Nume's dominance is a North American problem, or if he's just that good of a deck and everywhere else is just sleeping on him. Because some of the data that we have is skewed towards his dominance being mostly in North America. And then on top of that, because of the fact that EX6's outlook isn't looking like it's going to be changing the meta a whole lot, we're going to be talking about our overall expectations going into the EX6 meta. So before we get into that, today the question of the week is, what do you find to be something that you generally think is better than what is actually perceived to be? So, any of you could answer that one if you feel like it, just to get the ball rolling.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that one more time?
Yeah,
I got
so
spaced out for a second.
what's a deck that you think is basically a deck that's being slept on? Like, I know Headless is huge on Red Birds, and by Red Birds I mean Phoenixmon, and Phoenixmon is actually doing pretty okay in the meta. So I would say like that's a good example of a deck that's kind of being slept on. If you want to limit this to like EX6 decks, just because those are some of the newer decks and maybe they're gonna take people by surprise, or if you just want to speak in general, it's whatever.
Okay, so in general, the one that people are probably going to be sleeping on is going to be the Mastimon. Honestly, it may telegraph its stuff, but it can be quite annoying to deal with because, much like the Great Angels, which is its superior version, it has its own ability to just remove bodies without targeting them. So things with immunity kind of have a little bit of a problem. Things like the Magnamon, for example, say it's the turn after it's evolved. If they swing recklessly and there's already an Angel Woman or a Lady Devimon on board, they have to be scared that they don't get aced. Because Massimon Ace will just be like, bye. And it doesn't even have to be its own or your opponent's stuff. It could be your own stuff and still start trashing your opponent's security. So I think Mastimon honestly is on that list of be careful and don't sleep on it.
What about you,
Thoughts,
Headless?
Headless?
Well, I'm a purple player, but Phoenixmon is a purple deck disguised in red. It's pretty good. It's
I mean, they
sadly
booed him because he's right.
it's sadly gonna miss its window of like when it could have been good. So right now, like all of your deletion based effects are real deletion based stuff, and like the meta already hates on decks that are deletion based, right? Because everybody's afraid of Numemon, so there's just a lot of blue running around and effects that like are removing you by not actually deleting you. So bad for that. But the other thing is that like as we move into this next set after EX6, we move into BT17, and now Paladin mode exists. And now if you're a trash-based strategy, you kind of don't get to play the game.
Yeah, I mean,
Yep.
but it's still okay for right now. I mean, we saw something like Fanglongmon where it was really good, just completely fall off the face of the earth because its matchups changed
Oh,
because of Magnamon X, and then Magnamon X just said, "Hey, you're not actually a real deck. Thanks for playing."
it's actually a lot better now when we in EX6. And
Really?
yeah, so it does better into everything because now with the you can play the Ludomon piece. You can just slot that under any of your Devas and give yourself
Hmm.
protection. so that you're less afraid because you have an ace on top of it that you're gonna have to overflow. Like, sure, you miss your on deletion effects, but a lot of times just keeping the bodies better. And there's brand new stuff like, so they have forced attacks now because of that. So you can play like the Edamon, and that Ludomon itself does force attacks.
Okay,
So
okay.
so there's some cool new stuff, and like, to be fair, they don't do bad into Numemon, because if you can get to Fanglongmon, he can police the board pretty effectively because the Numemon bodies are also weak, and he's always immune. There's never a window where he's not immune to Digimon effects, and they don't play real option cards for removal, so
So what you're
Hmm.
telling me is I need to buy my Fanglongmons now.
I agree with you, honestly, because Fanglong, this meta, Numemon is a little bit of a problem, but Fanglong just says no. And everyone's been seeing that Numemon has consistently been smacking Magnamon around. So,
Yeah, that's mostly because like I was having this conversation with Risu, and like it's a problem in One Piece where there were like certain forms of removal are just better than others, and we already knew DP reduction was the best form of removal because it's a game mechanic, not an ability. So the game itself is saying this Digimon can no longer stay on the field, which is just way stronger than actually like, hey, I'm going to delete this. Especially since Numemon has the rare form of DP reduction that sticks to bypass a lot of protections, like even some options where it's just like, yeah, you become DP immune for the turn. Cool. It wears off, mine doesn't, and you're dead. Congratulations. Uh,
technically the strongest form of removal in the card game is the Bogramon thing. It's
oh,
the
tucking under Tamers and other
Tamer.
Digimon.
Yeah, yeah, because since technically that protection is so we have brand new protection, right? Like, so if you looked at the Commandramon from 14, right, it has a pretty strong form of protection, but it protects against leaving the battle area.
Yeah,
Whereas
and
if
tucking
you're
under
targeted,
Tamer.
yeah, is not leaving the battle area, so you're like actually removed. So that's
mhm.
technically the best form of removal because nothing in the card game aside from like pure true immunity like protects against it.
Yeah, outside of like Chaos Deck, which is just putting stuff into security, and that type of an
Yeah,
effect is still really strong, and why security control is good.
yeah, but we now have like the new format for protection is if I would leave the battle area, so it's covered with it. Whereas the Bogramon, you're never leaving the battle area, so you get outed, which is funny. But that
Mhm.
form of removal only exists on two Digimon right now, right?
Yeah,
Base
Bakura and
Bogramon
Arrestra.
and Arestra Superior.
So
Yeah,
that brings me up to this: is do you guys think Hunters will make a comeback?
Hunters still kind of does okay in Japan. Like, it's not hyper dominant, but like the problem is when Digimon or like when Bandai makes decks like Hunters, they have a date stamp on them. And that date stamp is this is when they are at their strongest point, and everything past that they seem to progressively be getting weaker and weaker just because they can't efficiently play with the new tools and adapt to the game based on all of like these new generic cards that they keep printing. So it's like their limited access at that really is limiting their overall success. Just
Their
because they
big thing
can't.
was they were always like a speed issue, like
Yeah.
whereas you were just faster than them, like it really didn't matter, like because they have to spend too many turns having to set up the tamers to like actually get all their effects strong. Because otherwise, like when you think about it, Quartzmon's still a pretty great boss monster, and superior modes have, like we were just talking about, like some of the best removal in the card game, and then the fact that they can either double swing or they can attack under Quartz, like is all stuff that would be really strong. Like if you could, in theory, get into your Quartzmon like turn two, you could just kind of invalidate like most of what Numemon's doing. Because now they can't be aggressive with any of those bodies. They just have to sit there, and you can choose to ping them off. And then any of the ones that would float into something else, you just tuck it under something else with a Restrigermon Superior mode. So like in theory, it could be good, but it's just a speed issue where I don't think they do enough.
Well,
So
I
they
also think that Digimon Emperor definitely ruins a lot of their potential because they usually want to raise out on a rookie. They have the ability to Digivolve, but they would rather get the when Digivolving ability on their level 4
Yeah,
rather
'cause they
than
really need it.
yeah. So
Hmm.
like it also subsequently kind of
Yeah, and they only
hurts the
have the one
deck.
memory setting tamer. Otherwise, the rest of them like kind of depends on what you're playing.
Yeah,
But you
use like bait because like gaining the memory seems really good, but like in actuality, you need to keep a constant hand size, and he's actively taking that away.
get.
Hmm.
Yeah,
So
so that's kind of their problem right now. But otherwise, like Quartzmon's still a strong card, or Restoration Superior, still a pretty stellar card. Like at any point where that card can like make it back into the meta, I won't be happy because I'm a hater on that card.
yeah, who
I feel like it
knows?
Mirage
does
has
a
to
lot.
be careful in this upcoming meta because Demon Lords do have a number of ways of dealing with them.
Yeah, I mean, there's also just a lot of extra tamer hate. Like, so it is going to be a little bit harder on some of the tamer based decks that can't necessarily move fast enough, or like in Cross's situation, relies on your tamers with inheritables sticking around, and now we have decks that could snipe it. So it makes those a little bit harder. But yeah, I'm curious to see when BT19 comes out what they're gonna do with Cross Hearts to see if that's gonna actually just be more generic save stuff, if they're gonna reboot it and change how the deck functions, or by that I mean make a new deck, but that's all in the future that we currently don't know.
You
But
see, that's where I think they're going to be going with the cross ancient variants because when you use the cross on any of the ancients, they have a certain ability. If you use the main 5, they spit out a tamer. So you can literally just spit out Taiki. Taiki's effects will virtually keep you running on everything as you load up with, say, Takuya or the dual tamer.
yeah, I think there's from a mechanical perspective, there's a lot of experimentation, but we have to wait and see what BT19 is going to be doing when those spoilers come out in Japan for us. But right now, we basically have just finished BT16. We have 3 events worth of data to look at before we kind of give our final goodbyes to BT16. So the big one that is on Eggman events is Tax June Ultimate Cup. So this we know is a 81 players, 7 rounds of Swiss. Top 16 archetype breakdown is 4 Mirage, 3 Nume, 3 Magna, 2 Yellow Vaccine, which are yellow based Magnas, 1 Belfie, 1 Lilith Loop, 1 Tyrant, and 1 Sylphie. So that's a pretty decent
Kind of
spread.
surprising to see a Belfie.
I
That's
mean,
good.
he's playing 8 Ukamon, or like 7 to 8
Yeah,
Ukamon, so
it's
it's not
good old
really.
Pokemon deck.
Yeah. As far as what won the event, it was Numemon, and that was actually a 7-0 because Bandai changed their rules to allow, in case there is a person who's undefeated at like round 6 or 5, they still have to keep going. So it was a clean 7-0 sweep for Numemon. Second place was also Numemon. Third place was Magnamon X. Fourth place Mirage. Fifth place Belfie. Sixth place Magna X. Seventh place Mirage, eighth place Lilith Loop, ninth place Yellow Vaccine, 10th place Magnamon X, 11th place Tyrant, 12th Nume, 13th Mirage, 14th Mirage, 15th Yellow Vaccine, and 16th Sylphie. So as far as taking a look at some of the more interesting decks, like we kind of said before, I'll kind of show it here. Like we kind of said before, it's just Ukamon. Like you're just an Ukamon rush deck. Although this deck was doing something really
Dark
weird.
Masters, Apocalypse stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like combining Dark Masters and Apocalypse just because like Belfie himself, in terms of his core cards, is literally half a deck. So they're just
Yeah.
like, cool, let me just fill the other half with Apocalypse. And then you have Lament of Friendship to be able to try to grab back the Apocalypse. And yeah, you just
Yeah,
have
it's
like
honestly not bad. Like in theory, like Apocalypse we know is a problem. Like he can get the protection, he can then get an extra mega under him. So like not terrible. Like you get all your Dark Masters, so you get the 3 for sure. You eat a sleep mode and then you eat a rage, so you are already at 5 megas. So like that's pretty good, right? That's how many cards milled? It's two per, so
Uh,
that's 10.
yeah.
Yeah, and like 10 trash off the top is pretty good when they can't like interact with the guy.
Yeah, and then you get some like cool Ukamon raising stuff as well, so that way you could be like, cool, Ukamon raising, hatch Digi Egg, sacrifice Digi Egg proto form, pass. Like it's not bad. It's not bad. It is a little bit awkward, but it's not the worst thing ever because the Numemons with the Demimeras, they actually do want to chip the opponent because you're not going to gain like an immense amount of value because of how Proto works. So it's literally just the Numes feeding off of each other, which you're just using mostly as just extra resource tools.
And honestly, Rage
Mhm.
right now is in a pretty good spot, like, because most of the meta is sitting on level 5s to then, like, Blast Evolve on top of. But even if you got, like, Edamond, like, Belfie goes off, start of main, before you're first to make the attack.
Yeah, like there's definitely a spot for this type of deck in the meta, and I don't think it's bad either because Belfie he will hit 17 right at
Hmm.
full power, which still isn't bad. It might have a hard time against specific walls like Tyrant, but against like Magnamon, that's only 15, so it's not like
Yeah,
it's
on most turns, if you're
insurmountable.
blue, because you have the Demi V egg, you're 16. So yeah, in most cases you should beat Magnas off on their off turns when they're like not the like 18, 19.
Yeah, so I think Belfie is not bad. Congrats on that. Next up, just to take a quick look at, is Lilith Loop because we have Millith, which is a completely different deck than Lilith Loop. And if anyone's curious on what this is doing, it's Arukenimon, Mummymon.
Numemon. Hmm.
It's that little engine on top of, again, 8 Ukamons. This is a common trend. 8 Ukamons is just a thing for these decks that just want to hard play level 5s and up, or even level 4s and up, just because there's no reason not to. The Demi Marimons, again, are used for that value engine to cycle through your deck faster, get some good chip in so you could actually deal damage. I'm really kind of confused on how this deck actually wins because it just doesn't seem like it's really doing anything. Like you're doing this Arukeni Mummymon loopy value stuff, and it seems like you're just trying to get into Cherubimon or Shine Ruin mode and try to shut the opponent out. But like I'm not super familiar with how this engine functions as a whole. It just seemed like when I played against it at locals, it realistically just didn't do anything. It amounted to a lot of nothing.
So I think mainly like your early stages of this deck are supposed to just be you get your Mummymon or Kennymon out like really cheap. You keep turn with some of your like memory gain tools here, and then you go into like one of your megas to then make a ruin like as early as possible to kind of like help you control the board. And then from there, you're eventually kind of trying to get into your single Cherubimon to like explode into like reviving all the bodies, and then just kind of like doing rookie swarm shit.
So that makes a little bit more sense. But I know people have been experimenting with the Arcani Mummy engine and stuff. So it's cool to see it at least was able to kind of do something in a mid-sized event.
It's definitely pretty good to play level 5s for 3. So
Or zero.
yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
And then the last new deck that was able to break into top 16s for this meta was the Sylph deck, which I don't know if anyone actually watched my gameplay on that. I was basically just trying to abuse the fact that Magnamon X is like an absolutely disgusting card. And this deck is basically taking that type of mentality. I'm not really a super huge fan of how they approached it, but they were able to get success. So what I'm saying is just take Mayan and just that's better and play that, and maybe you'll have better success. I don't know. But jokes aside, it's just Sylphimon. Like, it's just doing the whole Sylphimon. Biomon's a good search engine. Hawk's a good search engine. Salamon's the setup. Then you have Gato, your armors to be able to make Magnamon live. Then you have your DNAs with partition between the Dino Bee and Sylphmon. They're running one of the old Sylphmon just because more DNA is good, because that's the whole point of the deck. And it still removes stuff pretty well between the Yoli and Sora, and you still have Beastly Storm, which I think is an okay card. You got some good control tools with Revelation and Crimson Blaze. So like it's fine. It's just let me DNA and get into either Magnamon X or Valka Ace and just try to shut down the opponent. That's honestly what the deck is trying to do. But it's a good control deck. It's strong and efficient at doing it.
I think the big thing that's kind of interesting to me is that they're on this this little Sora package. And I see exactly why, because the armors, both of them fall within the parameters for her. So that you can, like, cheat them out and then, you know, be allowed to DNA with them. But I feel like they maybe needed a couple more, like, ways to return a Digimon to hand. Like, realistically, it's just the Gatomon. And then the Wings of Love itself. Like, I'm seeing too much on, like, a way to recur a Mon from trash.
So
like,
maybe a
they're,
fifth egg.
They're on the Koromon. They're on the Koromon eggs. Like in my version of Sylphimon, I'm actually on the Yokomon from 14. Or no, sorry, from 15. Which I like because it lets you pick up like just about everything in the deck. Like you can pick up Sylphimons, you can pick up Gatos, you can pick up any of your Avians. Like the only people it misses are like the Salamons.
Yeah, Salamons and Magnamon.
Yeah, well, in my current one, I wasn't playing it, but yeah, the only other guy it misses is like Valcase and Dino Bee, but yeah. Otherwise, everybody else you can grab off of your Yokomon egg, so kind of feel like maybe that would have done a little bit more, but I guess they'd rather just see brand new cards, but like, I don't know. I don't mind that the Yokomon just gives me the one that I actually want, that I only ever need to see like one of, you know?
Yeah, and then they also are on just a random stray Agunimon, either for that hybrid for game factor, or just another Digimon to try to DNA with to be a cheap level 4 to get out. So I think it's another deck that it has lots of potential. I don't know if this is actually like the best build of it, but there's definitely a lot of room for this deck to be good. It just hasn't had a whole lot of competitive success, maybe because people are more confident with other decks or what be it. But again, things like this are generally easier to win with in mid-size events versus larger events just because of the sheer amount of players playing the variety of decks. Which is why I think like Numemon more specifically is a North American problem because our events are just straight up bigger. But we're going to get into that later because we still have two other events to look at. They're both Latin American events. So I'm going to talk about the small one really quickly. Well, the one we actually only have top 8 data for, and that is the Hotel Grand Palace. This was a regional, and the top 8 breakdown is as follows. First place, Leviamon. Second place, Numemon. Third place, Mirage. Fourth place, Yellow Vaccine. Fifth place, Royal Knights. Sixth place, Numemon. Seventh place, Imperial. And if you're wondering which, it's blue-green. I mentioned Virus if it's Virus Imperial. And then eighth place was Security Control. So pretty much all of these decks are already known. The only ones that really stood out to me is the first place list, which is Leviamon, because who would have thought Leviamon would be good? And they're actually using the Merva/Anubis engine, which they already were, on top of like their own pieces. This one's leaning a little bit harder into the Cerberus and Dober stuff because it's running the new Dobermon and new Cerberusmon to be able to give stuff rush, which is real good, and just act as another way to give your Digimon blocker, which again is pretty good.
I do like those new Dober pieces. I've been like messing around with like some of the new purple builds that exist out there. Like people call it like dog loop and stuff like that. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, and I think like a deck like this is still just pretty good. Anubismon's like ridiculous, and then we already knew how good the Merva engine was between like Goblimon and Dober X, and then it just is running its own stuff. It's a very clean list for what I would expect Leviamon to be in BT16. So I don't know if anything changes between this and EX6 because we do technically have a new Leviamon, but that is neither here nor there. And then the other list from this event is security control, which again, it's security control. There's no real surprise here. They are running some floodgates to try to slow down the opponent. They're running the Magna Angemon and Magnum Angemon Ace as just easy recovery tools. They're actually running Valk Ace because you could just hard play a solid Mega, which is why they're also running Gallant and Avenge Kid because they both make themselves cheaper and do really powerful things. Serafi is to go on top of your Digimon. They're actually running the Angemon, again, because of the on-play security attack minus. It's not exactly as good as recovery, but it stalls. It's just there to stall. And then everything else is pretty much known except for the tying Karis to splash in a little bit of red to play with Crimson Blaze just to try to continue to shut down the opponent. And because you're already playing a couple more red Digimon, it just makes a card like Crimson Blaze really good because you could like Valkyrie Ace, and if Valkyrie Ace didn't kill anything, you could just Crimson Blaze.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's security control. We all hate it, and that's why some people still win with it.
Yep.
And then the last event is the Latin American Ultimate Cup. We do actually have top 16 data for, and we also do know how many people played in this event. This one had 92 players, so it was probably, again, 7 rounds. And first place was Numemon, second place was Numemon, third place was Numemon, fourth place was Imperial, fifth place was Magnamon, sixth place was Yellow Vaccine, as well as seventh. Eighth place was Red Hybrids, ninth was Magnamon, 10th was Phoenixmon, 11th was Yellow Vaccine, 12th and 13th were both Numemons, then another Imperial, then a Magnamon, and at 16th was another Red Hybrid. So all these decks, again, we kind of already know what they're doing. The meta, for the most part, is pretty much solved at this point because the way I described it, and I have a whole video breaking it down, there's realistically 5 meta decks in this format. Everything else likes to pretend like it's actually good, but like it's just fringe on, like, they're all literally rogue decks outside of Numemon, Magnamon, Yellow Vaccine, Mirage, and Imperial. Those are definitively the 5 decks that are actually consistently topping more than any other deck by actually a large margin. But if you're wondering what Red Hybrids is doing, just as a quick refresher, Red Hybrids just is playing Ukamon, obviously. Some are playing more Ukamon than others, but you're at least running bare minimum 4 Ukamon. It's like 4 to 6 Ukamon. And then they all are starting to tech in Valkyrace and Garudamon. So Garudamon is actually pretty good to try to snipe the Magnamon and play a Tamer if you really need to start getting going. Just because Magnamon X has blocker and it's an ace and you're already playing on level 4s. And then Valk is just to go on top of Garuda because what are you going to do with that Garuda? Swing and then it dies and then overflow? No, so you need something to do with it, and Valk just offers you more removal, which the deck kind of needs because it has a very distinct problem with hitting specific types of numbers.
Mm-hmm. My big issue, though, is I feel like your 5 count is so low that, like, that ace is kind of funny, but I guess it doesn't matter because your real Mega in the deck uses your Tamer as a level 5, so...
Yeah, you literally are just either hard playing Garuda, or if it just lines up to try to bone the opponent because they're trying to swing with a blocker, then, or they just don't have protection, then it's just a way to like be a cute sniping tool. But most of the time you're probably just going to end up hard playing it just to play a Tamer, just to get going, because the deck does have a problem with setting up its tamers. That's why most of the time they just hard slam the tamers, which is not the greatest feeling in the world. That's why they try to use Digivolve on top of the BC7 Flamemon, so that way they could swing with whatever level 4, hope it dies, and then play the tamer for free that way.
I also kind of think that in this meta, I wouldn't really want Atomic Inferno. I'd rather just play Fire Rockets. Like, it does the same thing except for like the when I get blocked thing. But out of security, I feel like it killing a blocker is more impactful right now than all of my guys gain security attack, but half of my guys aren't gonna ever get to touch security anyways.
Fire Rocket's not bad. I kind of like it too, just because you also can use it on like other targets as well. So you could be like, yeah, I'm going to Fire Rocket and Ukomon.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel as bad as like Atomic Inferno hashtag wasted value on an Ukomon, because now it forces them to try to like, oh, this could hit like a tamer and then something else, and then they just got 2 checked with a rookie.
Mm-hmm.
Which I can't tell you how many times that actually happens. Not for this deck specifically, but like my rookie is able to get 2 to 3 checks off of the opponent's security.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe Fire Rocket's not bad. That's
like,
something we'd have to test.
Where we weren't as like blocker heavy, I think the Atomic Inferno was pretty good to like give the wide security attack plus, but I don't think it's as good here in this current landscape.
Yeah. Or if you want to pay a little bit more, you could also just play the red plugin too, because it's just another generic security attack plus. Sure, it's not removal out of security, which is the whole point on Fire Rocket, but it can help you set up a tamer just for free, which is not bad.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, outside of that, Birds is like the only other like surprise deck out of this event's top 16, because it's literally one of the other decks outside of Red Hybrids that's not one of the top 5 decks, which there's 1.5 million deck lists for, that are all pretty much the same at this point. Just a couple of minor tech choices here and there. But yeah, you're more of the bird expert if you just want to hit on that real quick.
Yeah, so they're really heavy on the protoform. Like, a lot of lists I don't think can make enough room to play this many protoforms. But you can see kind of like where they made their cuts. Like, so they're only on a single Wings of Love. They're on the 2 Christies with the pairing like 2 Christie Biomons. I'm of the mind that you realistically don't need 2 Akihos. I'm getting that maybe they just wanted to see it more often, and that's why the second one's there. But realistically, you get more than enough rush from the like very loopable Garudamon X's. Like, just the pure fact that I can go into a Garudamon, get a Tamer out for free, and then become a Garudamon X, give either myself rush or like some other body, because like I'm picking up Sora, and then that thing that I picked up can just be a different Garudamon X that's already in my trash. The other thing to note is Garudamon X and Wings of Love, I'm pretty sure. I have to check. I think, no, I think it's just Garudamon X can pick up the Valk Ace, so you can just recur it, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that might be why they're only running 1, because it's just a recurable piece.
Exactly, like, it's pretty good in that regard. They're on the Aquilamons. I think the Aquilamons are okay. I get why they're there. They're to snipe Pomumons or Pillows. But I don't feel that they're that necessary. In most games where, like, my opponent is playing those Floodgates, like, I remove it at my 5s without any issues. Like, so realistically, I don't think that they're that necessary. I'd rather be playing what I'm playing, which is Saberdramons. Because Saberdramons can come down, you can give them rush, and then they can be decent removal for, like, actual big threats, or, like, annoying big blockers or something like that. So that's kind of where I'm at, but otherwise, like, this looks about right. Like, Birds is really cool in that, like, you can be very lean with your ratios, because you have so much recursion. Like I said, you're a purple deck, but you're getting to play red cards, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. So that kind of brings, like, with that brings BT16 to a close. And this kind of, like, got me looking at all of the different events because I literally keep an Excel spreadsheet. And uh, funny enough, all of the American events are the ones where Numemon is, like, actually in, like, hyper complete dominance, where it's just like, okay, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Even in other territories, Numemon is still a big deal because Numemon has been the number one deck that's consistently taking first place in almost every event. I think there's like a very small handful of events where he wasn't in first place. And if it wasn't him, it most likely was to the other top 5 decks of the format. So yeah, Numemon definitely is a huge powerhouse, but like everywhere else seems to have a more diverse meta spread than North America when it comes to their events. And I think part of it might be the sizes of these events. It's like, okay, 82 players versus 300. Like, that's 200 player difference on, and ideally, or not ideally, and usually 2 extra rounds on how successful a deck like Numemon can be. I don't know if that gives it even more buffer to do well because more players will be on it and there's more rounds, so it has more chances to prove itself. I'm not a tournament mathematics expert by any stretch of the means, but like, what do you guys think? Do you think that Numemon actually is this like big of a problem, or is it just because of how North America perceives the deck and our event size?
So I have to say this right now. I agree with what Digi Panda was saying. If they hit Ukomon, like the promo, it'll instantly start shrinking down the number of Numemons we've seen, you know? So it being a problem now is mostly due to the fact of the rookies that is currently in its deck.
I mean, we were running the promo Ukomon before and it wasn't like hyper dominant, but I also think like this, I've said this in my meta report video. I honestly think it's mostly because of Magnamon X gatekeeping a lot of decks from being viable that could possibly check Numemon. Doesn't mean that they're going to. It just opens the doors for less people to be playing Numemon because they have a wider variety of decks to play, and B, something could come out of the woodworks that would be able to check Numemon a little bit harder.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's pretty true because we did see back in 15, right? We saw like Gallantmons being like meta choices, meta calls to deal with the Numemons that existed then. But to be fair, they're a lot less good into Numemon in the current landscape because they did lose to Valgace. I think that's kind of the big difference maker is like Valgace is what really like pushes Numemon over the edge, where like we've seen them work in like the Edamon that forces you to attack just because of how strong the like Valgace blades are.
Yeah, because like, what was the best level 6 yellow or black ace in BT15? It was a Zulong. And
It was
like,
either a
Yeah.
Zulon or it was having at that point it was playing like Gargo if you were doing more black stuff.
right. So like, and that's only having the ability to potentially remove one body. Gargo is actually pretty decent because it could shut down some evolutions on any residuals. But Valk is definitely a lot stronger because it could actually just turn off the opponent's entire turn.
And like in theory, like that card doesn't seem like it'd be that crazy. Like for the, like the off turns, like after it's done its one Digivolving.
Yeah.
Because in most cases, you're swinging with a 12k to check body that if it dies gives your opponent core memory.
Well, the other upside is if it doesn't have 2 checks, then it kills an 8k or less on the spot.
Exactly, and that's the main thing is that like 8k is a pretty good threshold.
Yeah, it kills
Where
basically almost every playable level 5.
yeah, like the main thing though is that you have touch security first, so you do get to blast. Like the enemy gets to blast before you ever get to touch security. So it's not like the craziest thing, right? It's not like a true when attacking, but the main thing for me is that like that card is like has the same issues. Like I've been testing Hexablast, and a lot of the times, Hexablow, it's a blue archetype that just does not have DP anywhere in its stack. And more often than not, I can get a Hexablow that can make 3 checks, but it's a 12k body, so I generally either die on the second or the first check. And then I'm very sad. And that's kind of the same thing you would be expecting to see with Valve, right? Like, 12 is kind of the baseline, right, for Megas, but that's never been considered, like, a good number. Like, more often than not, you always wanted to be, like, 13 or 14 to, like, feel safe into most swings in like metas past, right? It kind of changed a little bit as we moved into like the burst metas, where like a lot more level 7s are like hiding in people's decks that are like at the 15k stat line.
Yeah, I definitely can see that.
But I think right now like it is a lot of like NA's like big like thing where they just want to play best deck in format, like, and that's all people care about is playing best deck. And
Yeah.
so I feel like this won't be as much of a problem once we hit unification. Like right now, it's too much of like we get to see all the data, we get to see all the iteration, and like the things that were kind of cool. Like the idea to play the Edamon, like, is a cool idea, but too bad Japan had it like months ago. So
Right. And then it started off the format being the winning deck, which also helped fulfill the self-fulfilling prophecy on playing best deck, because like I've been practicing a lot on Numemon, just because like somebody made a comment where it's just like if you're kind of not playing Numemon, it feels like you're just wasting your money or just throwing the event. And part of me wants to disagree with it, but like after playing a decent amount of Numemon, like there's not really a extra hardcore negative matchup. Like I do have some bad situations that the deck can get caught in. It can brick occasionally, but like it is just a relatively solid and easy to use deck. It's kind of crazy.
mhm. And I do think that there's like inherent problems with like the idea that they just gave us all before that it evolves for 0 and floats you into a level 6 is pretty silly.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of compounding issues that make it excel as one of the best, if not the best deck, because the Ukamon Rush stuff is pretty silly. Just the sheer amount of value you could gain off of them is like absolutely ridiculous. Especially if you know how to use that engine. That's a big thing. Some people, uh, they have it, but they might not be able to use it as optimally as others, and that's a big contention point on showing who's better at using the deck is how skillful you are at seeing the situations you have, knowing what cards to take, what to try to prioritize in what situation and matchup. That's like the real skill that some players just don't necessarily have the knowledge of. But it doesn't stop people from trying because it's outside of a couple of cards in a relatively accessible deck. Just because, like you said, Nume X is a what rare, and then Monze X is a common. So it's just like those two cards really helped push the deck last format. And now that we have a new ace card that is on color that we could use, technically we could use Vike, but there's no real reason to use Vike just because Valk is just better at control overall. And then you have some like bomb level 7s to try to shut the opponent out. You have plenty of like flexibility if you want to be more control based. You run Digimon Emperor to try to beat the mirror and to slow down other decks that want to use rookies out of raising. And then if you want to play more aggressively, then you play the Louis, the promo Louis that just lets you raise out and try to abuse Ukamon even more to kind of act as like, hey, here's my hybrid for game. It's less interactable, and there's actually nothing you could do about it.
Unless you're magically on Bogrilla Lithimon.
Or yeah,
Or one of the old Renamon pieces, right, where you raise a Digimon and it like gives sec minus or something silly to it.
yeah.
Yeah.
If only those cards can actually be playable. But yeah, I think like we do. North America more specifically does have the self-fulfilling prophecy of like let's just play the best deck, and that's why a lot of the results, at least our results, are skewed towards hyper optimizing and focusing on the best deck. Not saying other territories are not using it, because we saw what there was.
At the like three new big top in the top three.
Yeah. So literally in the Latin American Ultimate Cup, there was like 5 Numes. So believe me, everywhere else isn't immune to Numemon. It's just there's something about the roguiness of smaller sized events that just helps it not look like it's so good. But I don't know
Yeah.
if it's like actually like borderline, like it does feel very cracked. But I just feel like there's something missing from the meta to be able to keep it in check. And the fact that Magnamon has 2 versions of his deck, technically there's more, as we just saw with the Sylphimon. That like Magnamon, if you are a deck that just cannot deal with Magnamon, you just lose to Magnamon. I've played Magnamon a lot also in testing, and I can't tell you how many times I just get into a Magnamon and then I win because of it. And that's the unfortunate part of like Magnamon's existence, and why Numemon's like even better is because Numemon already was a good deck, and now it got better because Magnamon is limiting the matchups that it could possibly have, while also being one of the few decks that can kill Magnamon. And then that's where like you kind of start to see between these two decks where the meta is really forming around those 5, because you have Imperial, which can source strip, stun other OTK decks, and counter other Ace Digimon, which is like real good. Like I can't understate how good that actually can be at just literally giving you the win, on top of still having the same level of aggression, if not more, that it's always had.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have Mirage, which is another blue deck. So on top of being able to source strip, you are also actively bouncing, which is not triggering on delete effects, which bypasses both armor purge, and it bypasses obviously on delete. And then you also have the Mirage that, and Gomamon technically, that can make your Digimon unblockable, so it can just get around the Magna and not even care. And then because Numemon's not necessarily this hardcore control deck, it's not actually actively stopping the opponent from doing anything. So it's just like I could still make all my plays. It's just Numemon has the ability to respond to borderline any board state, which is the crazy part.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my perspective on like how this meta kind of formed around these 5 decks, and why these 5 decks are doing as good as they are. So with these 5 decks being the known best decks, where do you see EX6? Because honestly, like looking at Japanese data, obviously, and just kind of looking at the set and playing around with the set a little bit myself, like honestly, I think realistically Demon Lords is like the only deck that's actually in contention to be a consistent topper. I think like Mastimon and Angels, they have the ability to be able to top, just be those 1 or 2 ofs. Not like something where I'm just always going to be a consistent meta defining force.
Mm-hmm.
I
So,
think Demon's biggest problem though is that like if they ever become like truly relevant, there's so many easy outs to them. In that like we already know in the next format, right, in 17, that trash-based strategies have a much harder time existing because of Paladin mode Imperial.
yes.
So there's that issue that's gonna harm like Demon Lord's like potential success moving forward. In this current format, sure we don't have to worry about that, but if Demon Lord starts like being a decent meta share, then any deck that can play the play cost blocking rookies is just gonna start playing those, and then that deck kind of can't do anything. Like you have to rely on your Porcupa or Ogremons or Pummelwax to like out this thing, and then be allowed to play your guy. Otherwise, you don't really have a real deck.
Yeah.
And Demon Lords kind of is like also caught between a rock and a hard place in the mechanics it's working with, because it just cares about filling up the trash. But like there's very specific cards that want to either A, be milled, or B, be discarded. And a lot of the better cards are the blind mill cards in terms of filling up the trash fast enough. And the blind mill cards are also just the stronger cards in general, because you have Creepymon and you have Beelzemon that just straight up want to mill your deck. Which are arguably the best low rarity cards in the deck. And then you have what
Well, they're not
Levia,
the only ones that are the best ones.
Yeah.
Levia is also
and
you have
really
Levia
good.
and Belfi that want you
Ooh,
to
discard from your
discard
hand.
cards.
Hmm.
Which, like, that's good because you get the specific card you want into the trash if you have it in your hand. But like, those
My only
cards impact
problem
is
with
less.
the Belfi is the fact that you have to discard up to the number of things you want to suspend, and then you can only delete the lowest cost. So unless you already have a Beelzemon out ready to go, he's kinda trash, honestly.
I mean, that's why people run
You
them as
know?
like a two of like, just let me discard one card, suspend the one dude, and kill it. Like it, and that's what Leviamon honestly is doing. Let me just discard the one card, source strip your dude, and then kill it. Like that's all they're
Hmm.
trying to do. Like, because the deck is just like every other clock deck. Let me try to figure out a way to stall my opponent out until my egg space is ready to go with whatever it's trying to do, and then just pop into my win condition.
So
It's
one thing
another
though,
reason why they're playing the X's for Levia too. Because when your opponent tends to try and go off, you can just go, okay, I'm gonna activate Levia X that I milled off of Creepy, and Digivolve this Lucimon right here into it. You know?
Yeah, I mean they have
That's
to
I mean,
use
you
X
something that.
antibody
can't
to
do a
do
trash
it.
thing, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. They'd have to do something else on top of
Yeah.
that, but it's still just the fact that like Demon Lord still, like, it is the best clock deck, but it does still have its issues. Like with Royal Knights, it's just like it's the same
I feel like
weaknesses.
though its like clock aspect is slightly worse because your opponent can play around it a lot easier. Like in theory, for Royal Knights, the play around was to try and be like, oh, let me just build up a bunch of blockers or like put one of those blanket like security minus effects down so that like, oh, my opponent won't go off that turn or whatever. Whereas in the Demon Lords, like you can just put anything down, like Tamer's any like kind of body down, and that reduces like the number of securities cards that they'll actually trash like before the attack goes through.
Yeah, not to
Hmm.
mention you do have like some weird cards that are like, yeah, you just can't play Digimon by card effects that will block it. Then you also have stuff like uh Biting Crush, where it's just like, cool, you played your Digimon, let me bring out mine and
Hmm.
then kill yours.
The one good thing though is that like they can't set up the biting crush
Yeah,
like
they
the
can't
turn that you would go
advance.
off.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but they can
so you have
pre-set
to
it
do it
up like a
before it
turn or two
exactly.
before. Yeah.
Hmm. You have to know and see like, okay, I'm gonna have to just take the loss on this one turn so that I'm ready for if they try and Nagutum on me.
Right.
I
So,
do think in theory they're like set up decently well. Like all of their bodies are a lot more impactful than the Royal Knight bodies,
oh, a lot
since
more.
sadly like a lot of them were built in mind for like it'll be really cool when they get summoned by Omnimon and they all like have crazy effects at that point, but like their base effects are pretty lackluster, most of them.
Yeah.
Whereas like all of the Demon Lords, like all their effects are pretty impactful, like just Digivolve and Mill and Rush or like easy removal for like, and regardless of level, like it's DP threshold, it's like lowest DP base and stuff like that, which, doesn't matter if they only have one body on board.
Right.
And they ramp like really well. There's the funny builds where like you hope to get the King Drossel as your first egg, and then it just eats all of the rest of the gates, and you get to keep all of your bodies every turn and not worry about it. You're just constantly playing out like tons of these like strong bodies that don't have to leave the field.
Yep. The only problem with that one though is the fact that if Drossel eats it, you can't exactly go into Ogudo.
Well, I mean,
At
you'd
that point,
have
you
to
don't care.
digivolve. Yeah, you'd have to digivolve into them, and at that point, you just use your
But at
Dross
that
Guardian
point,
prevents
one.
Digivolve.
yeah, so you never can go into a Gudamon, but you realistically don't care because you're getting to keep all of your big level 6 bodies.
Yeah, which, as we already established with some other decks, it's hard enough to sometimes get rid of a level 5 quickly enough. And that's at full cost half the time.
Yeah.
So getting rid of a level higher just puts that much more pressure on. And then the fact that they're constantly playing one every single turn just compounds the issue.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's like you can do it where you're like those are the cool games, right? Where like it was first egg and it eats the rest of your gates.
Yeah, I mean, even if it's like your second or third egg, the fact that it's counting as another name to make
Another
a
name is
Gudamon,
fine.
yeah.
It does slow you down a little bit though, because you're not getting the another -3. You're only getting like maybe if it turns on your effect, like that's not bad because you'll probably be at like that means that you're probably at like -8, like if that
Right.
happens. But like in most cases, you'd rather just get all the way to your like -9, and then get to eventually the -12.
Right, but I
Yeah.
mean, the deck has some pretty decent low end options to where if you see gate early enough, you could still play around the fact that, or if you see Drazel early enough in Inheritables, it's not like the worst thing. It's not that great, but like, yeah, it's still workable.
Yeah, but and of course you don't have to play that version of it. I'm just talking about like what kind of is their like high roll kind of potential.
Right. And as far as like the other decks, I like just going down the line, there's just a lot of like casual garbage. Like, and I am just gonna say
Three Angel is the
garbage.
next best thing.
Yes, but that's mostly because it's just abusing Patamon and the
Yeah,
yellow vaccine engine. And then,
and Dominemon's kind of busted.
right, his protection is really strong, and then he combos with the Magnum Angemon from BT 16, and it's just this little like cycle on just, yeah, let me just play out like a field of level 5s out of my security for free because I'm looping,
Yep,
or
and
like
then the
for
rest,
minimal cost.
and then I'm playing a bunch of like pretty okay like Ace Digimon. Like none of the Three Angels are like the craziest thing, but like none of them are bad either. Like they're all very like good Ace Digimon.
Yeah, they're
Yeah,
just good.
Ruby is the best one out of all of them because it's literally a mini Heaven's Judgment.
Yeah, I mean, Ofani,
Oh,
well, I mean, him and
yeah.
Ofani obviously are the best because they're higher rarity, but like they all have their purposes that you could toolbox them into the deck for because you're just doing Dimini loop stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I
But
actually don't even know what Ofani does. Trash top, my
it's
fate.
removal.
Then when something's removed, depending
Yeah.
on the turn.
It like deletes an 8K and then it could either recover or give you security attack.
I mean, I could see that being ran in something like Nume as maybe a one of, but you still would probably prefer Valk over
No,
that.
you still prefer Valk. It's
If
mostly
you were gonna
for
play
three
any
gray
of them,
angels.
I think you would be playing Cherubi, because Cherubi is just a bigger Monze X.
Yes.
The only problem with Cherubi is that you have to spit out any of the yellow level 4s,
Yeah, so you
and
I
you only
mean,
really play one.
yeah, but
Yeah,
that one sometimes is all you need, and you could accommodate the deck for it. I'm not saying you should. I'm just saying you could.
yeah. I was just saying that would be the best out of the three if you were gonna play any of them in that
Yeah,
deck. I think Cherubi Ace is the one that is clearly like better situated for what that deck wants to do.
Yeah,
yeah. And
and
that's kind of
then
what's
when
making
come
Domini the best. Is like the second best is just he's abusing good cards to be good.
Hmm.
As far as third place goes, oh God, There's not really a good third place, is there? Like, maybe I think maybe Mastimon is in third place. Like, it's either Mastimon or Shakamon.
For
Um,
EX6.
Yeah, for like new decks out of EX6 that would have any kind of relevance or impact, because the rest of them really
So
don't.
Masty is not third place. It actually would be Ragnalord.
Ragnalord over Shaka?
yeah, it's more impactful as the thing, like, because it's a deck where your entire, like, play line is, I just,
Yeah, you're building
I
backwards.
play any guy, like, and he's a tiny little, like, loser baby, and I tuck a, level 6 under him, and then he dies, and my option says, oh, play a guy that was under that guy that's gonna die, and then you're like,
Hmm.
cool, and then you play level 6, and you're like, cool, now I'm entirely set up, because I
Yeah,
had an
and
option.
you don't even care about the Joggers one anymore. You're literally playing the Ace, and you're back to BT3 Ragnalord.
Yeah,
You
well that's
literally
because
just, I'm going to beat the hell out of you,
well
and
no,
you're not gonna like
you
it.
still play the ace just because like if
That's
Oh
why I
no,
said you play the Ace and you play
he's
BT3.
saying you
yeah.
don't play ST
You don't
Yeah, you
Ragnarok.
play
don't play the
ST.
DNA. Yeah.
Hmm.
You don't play the actual DNA just because the deck is now back to being a single stack deck.
Yeah, where and so like the fact that like you could just turn two basically like for almost nothing like go kind of crazy is pretty funny.
Yeah,
Like
and then you're just
its
building
title potential is
backwards.
really good. Like, and to be fair, all of the effects that like happen when you tuck from hand are pretty decent. Like gain protection, force your opponent to attack so that you can do an ace play, or like gain a bunch of stats so that you're bigger than Magna X.
Okay, I can see it. I mean, it still has like the glaring flaw of like, yeah, I could just DP reduce you to oblivion before the start of your turn to just ignore everything you're
That's
doing.
literally everybody though.
Yeah, I
So
know. That's the big problem. Like that's like
Your numbers though, your base numbers are at least better because you have inheritables that are giving you stats on your turn, and your if you are Ragna, you're already like a 15k body.
yeah.
Plus, if you have like a 2k here, a 2k there, like those numbers matter. Like, because I think Numemon's like for the most part, right? Unless you have to be doing like the play line where you're getting two Monza X's out on the same turn, right? Where you're
Yeah.
like,
mhm.
I have a Nukomon, I have whatever the heck this is, that then becomes Monza X spawn new Numemon, and that's -6. And then you put a Monza X with Protoform on top of that guy to then spawn another guy, and then that's a -8, so that's what, like 14? Like 14 hits,
Something like that.
kills Magna, and that's fine and good, but it doesn't do enough because that's 14k, right? That's 14k lingering, so it's not even enough to kill Ragna on like base numbers alone, and then he'll
Well,
also
if you have the
be
Monzais, then that extends each of those by 3k, so you can hit
yeah.
those numbers easier.
Hmm. Which, if we account for that, that's 20k, and like that's enough, right? Like
Okay. I think
even with
you're
enough stuff,
selling me
but
on Ragna being the third best, but like in the meta landscape, I still think like just against source stripping and just ignoring your defenses, he's still gonna have a hard time.
hmm
Well, that's actually where if you time everything right, they can't source strip you because certain effects just say no.
What
right.
affects
If you have your
this?
immunities from your shield boys, your big Brywin Ludos, right, giving you immunity on your opponent's turns.
Hmm.
Is it actually immunity or is it just
It
like
is immunity.
no, it just
Here,
says it
let me.
can't
I'm a.
leave or be deleted. And
let
then
me
the
remind myself. It's the old Byron, right? That says you're unaffected by your opponent's Digimon effects during their
I'm
turn.
looking at it right now between the two.
Yeah, it's the old
All right.
ST13 one.
yeah.
So yeah, it's unaffected, and
Hmm.
that's the one you mainly play.
Well, you play both.
Be-
Yeah, in most cases, that's the one you want to absorb. Like if you are BT3 Ragna, and then if you can justify it, because since a lot of the times you're more likely to have the Durandal on field,
Okay.
You can make sure that you pick that Brywin when you do the DNA. But yeah, and then you can just always tuck in the other one. The other one, also I think gives blocker
So
and
I guess like
are
to
inheritable.
I guess to try to
Oh,
recontextualize things, like
mhm,
going backwards, we should probably just like say, hey, how does this deck do into the top 5 of
mhm.
current BT16? I think that's a better way to look to see like how actually viable these decks are, because if they can't handle the top 5, then they're probably not actually meta playable. So we already know that Demon Lords basically can handle anything as long as he's not being locked out of the game, which is
Mhm.
good. Like, that's what makes him meta viable. He does have answers to handle the floodgates. Most decks aren't running like 50 bajillion and a half floodgates to actually stop him. So like there's that. So that's where Demon Lords kind of fits in, is it can handle almost any deck. Um, and then Dominimon. How does Dominimon actually do into the top 5? Like, I think
No.
Magna's pretty hard on it. Like, you just can't really do anything to Magna, and that's the
The
big unfortunate
problem
thing.
with Domini Turbo is the fact that you're using your security to virtually spit out everything.
Yeah,
So that
and
means you
Magna just
have no
hits.
way to real recovery.
Well, also Magna just cares about Digimon, like cards being removed from security. So he's triggering on both players' turns because, oh, you made a card leave your security. Cool. Now I have the buffs. Thank you. I'm immune to everything you're going to be doing.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and then you have all these Ace Digimon that like are cool, but like swinging into Big Magna is not great for them.
Yeah, and because
Yeah.
of
Protection.
Numemon's DP reduction, it just actually doesn't care because the deck doesn't really DP boost a whole lot. It's just hoping that its protections are good enough. So you could still just DP reduce it to oblivion and then just ignore everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I think like maybe blue could just out aggro it, like outpace it. Like, let me try to hit your security as quickly as I possibly can before you could ideally get into Dimini to start looping and having this like big
But
protective
that's just
board.
Yellow's problem right now in general. Like, if
Right.
you go fast enough and you take all their like as like a good number of their security, they just are left with so few options to like actually do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Ragnarlord still kind of just struggles with blue, I think. Like, and half of the top decks are blue. So it's
Now,
looking pretty rough. And a lot of his protections are either against Digimon or deletion.
Yeah.
So you could still easily like, let me just source strip your Digimon and then bounce it. Like, you
Well,
get specific turns where Ragnarlord's immune, and then
mhm,
that can sometimes wear off, and then you're
yeah.
just kind of stuck. And then blue also has plenty of ways to DP boost itself in Magnus' case, or just literally get around the Digimon. Like, I think it still has a harder time into the top 5. I think like we up talked it a lot, but that's like against literally everything but the top 5.
yeah.
I mean, it's fine into blue because like they have a hard time, right? So like the best blue decks right now have kind of a hard time against like removing higher than 5. Right? Like 5 is their easy point where they can kind of mess with it, but it's a lot harder for them to do anything against a 6. So if you get your 6 out as early as the deck wants to get its 6 out, you're probably fine. You'll get your turn where like the Ragna Ace is like immune to everything, and then on the like subsequent turns or whatever, maybe you put the proper Brywin Ludo under it, and so you're immune to your opponent's effects on his turn.
Yeah, I think like the biggest thing that's holding the deck back is its level of consistency is just a lot lower than all of the other top decks. Like, their consistency and general play lines are way higher, way faster, because
Mm-hmm.
you're limited on your acceleration tools because your deck is running both colors, and we don't have that new memory boost to be able to actually use the type of acceleration tool efficiently. And even
Those
then,
freaking memory boosts are kind of cracked.
well, the other problem is memory boosts are actually fair for their cost and what the payback is, where training cards are not. And the fact that he's not able to use training cards means he's actually still going to be slower and he's less consistent. So I think like the highs are really high, but the brick potential is more than the top 5.
Well, that's where Ragna actually has the ability to either be the mix or you can run either single color because it has that ability now with the new EX6
You
stuff.
really wouldn't want to though. Like the thing about the new stuff though is that it just really doesn't care. Like you can build the most suboptimal stack, but because at any point you can be like, oh, I'll spend 1 memory here, or 2 memory here, or 3 memory there,
Yeah, you fix your
and like
stack.
you can just fix your stack. So like at any
Mhm.
point you can just be like, oh, I'm fine, I'm good again.
Yeah, and if you're
Like
reducing your tools to literally just the black new stuff, that's going to severely cap your ability to fix yourself.
and the thing
Yeah.
is that like if you when you build like these mega stacks that you can get, like you end up with some pretty great effects. Like you're a big piercing guy who doesn't trigger security effects
Yeah.
from like option cards and stuff like that, or what's the exact text?
Yeah, you just don't
I have to
trigger
check that.
security
Yeah, you
effects.
just don't trigger security effects. So like they're not getting timers, they're not getting option cards, they're not getting those trainings and stuff that like normally like are kind of feels bad when you like plop those onto your opponent's board for them. Like there's lots of cool stuff. It's just getting there that sometimes is annoying. Like you kind of live or die by your new option card, your mythical arms of salvation. Like are quite literally your like saving grace. That's how you win the card game.
Yeah. And yeah. I think like it's a good deck. I still think it just kind of struggles a bit just because of all the reasons that I said. I'm
Mhm.
not trying to discredit or downplay it. It's just
I,
I looking at the
I
top
feel like
5, I don't think it has that great of matchups into the
mhm.
majority of it.
I feel like it's better than Massey because Massey's big issue is that like you need to sit on a level 5 Digimon, so a lot easier to remove than a level 6 Digimon
You don't have
that are
as many
all
protections.
It has 6k DP.
6K DP, which is a terrible threshold. Dies in just about
Yes.
everything in the format.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mastimon
like
is it may be a sleeper, like I said in the old or in the earlier bit, but it telegraphs itself way too bloody hard and is way too easy to deal with.
even when like you were bluffing, right? Like we've played tons of the matchup, like where you would just be bluffing. You'd be like, okay, I'm just gonna have to like hard slam one of the level 5s, and hope that that's scary enough that like you just won't do anything. I'm just like, cool, cool, cool. I'm still just gonna do my normal playline, and I'll incidentally out your guy because it's a 6K level 5 Digimon that I
Yeah.
could care less that it was there for.
I legitimately have tried so many times against this man to bluff. And he's just like, nah, fam. You're gonna lose it.
Yeah, but can we just agree that Zhang Pengmon and technically Bagramon and
It's
Dan
Devimon
Devi
and
are like all
yeah,
just do nothings. Like they're just all not very good
Diabora,
decks.
yeah. So
Yeah.
Well,
I think
Diaboro
Diabora.
can kind of do stuff. He has an ace. He has the ability to potentially run protections easier because he's naturally in black. So you could actually just either digivolve or slide him under. And he has decoy. He has decent
Does
memory
he?
gain.
Is EX6 the set that gives him the really good Infamon, the one that like has Digivolve whenever a token gets played out?
Yeah,
Hold on.
yeah. All turns when another Diaboromon in its name is played, digivolve one.
Yeah,
That's the
honestly,
inheritable.
that inheritable is
Yeah.
such a brick house. Like I've played against a couple Diaboromons, and like that effect alone was like pretty detrimental. Like to the point where I'm like, oh, I'm glad I'm in blue, and I'm just gonna take that out of you because man, is that annoying.
Yeah, I think like again, Diaboromon is looking to be pretty good. I think he wants to be like this big token combo style deck where it's just like, let me just spawn a whole bunch of tokens in a single turn and then just absolutely wreck my opponent with something, whether it's rush, security attack plus,
He's
or
sadly in
whatever.
the P17 waiting room where he needs his new Armageddon. Like the new Armageddon is really good for him, but like the old one's
From
not
what I saw in
terrible.
Japan, they don't even use the new
Do
one.
they not like the new one?
No, they've
The
been
one
using the
out
old one
there.
because it stops level 7s.
Okay.
And like it's just an easy
I was playing
rusher, so
against
it's like you
maybe
sacrifice the
the new one,
token.
but maybe.
Yeah, you just
Yeah.
sacrifice the token and have an instant rusher level 7 that shuts down every
Oh,
other level
I know
7.
why they were playing it. Yeah. So they were playing it because it's black.
Yeah,
Because they were on trainings. That's the whole reason they were playing it. The person I played against.
yeah. Oh, okay, yeah. I mean, like the fact that Diabormon also now has good black level 6s means that it actually can use those acceleration tools. Like I think Diabormon out of everything in the set probably is like the biggest sleeper to me because he has the potential tools to be good. It's just unfortunately a lot of some of those tools are just a little bit suboptimal because they are on the older side, and the new stuff is really good too. Like he just has stuff. It's just what's the combination to make him good, and is it actually good? That's the real big thing. I think he has the potential, like I said. It's just I don't know in this current meta landscape if what he has is actually good enough.
Hmm. Yeah. I
So
think.
in the current landscape, I would say my vote is on no. He doesn't
I
My
think.
have
vote my vote is also on no. I think like he could be a good like rogue deck to be able to get like one or two tops in the EX6 environment, but I don't think he's going to be a consistent topper. But the fact that he actually to me seems like he has the potential to get a top, that's already something that I would say is kind of impressive versus some other decks.
So I see in 17, the other Infirmon also gives the same inheritable. So having two of that is pretty good.
Yeah, so right
So I
now
think
what
with
people are
17
doing
stuff, he gets there pretty good.
Yeah, what people are doing right now is they're just using obviously his new Inframon that he got in EX6, and then they're kind of just filling out whatever slots the other Inframon is supposed to be. So they have I've seen Mamemon, I've seen Raiji Ludamon, I've seen both of the old Inframons that are good, the one that has the on
Yep.
delete to play token, or the
Uh-huh.
one that reduces evolution cost just because like oh if I could get into my Diaboromon using like the first Infamon, that's a 2 cost evolution. If I have an errata and his ability and the memory generating Kurosari, then that's a free evolution into a level 6 and I spawn 2 tokens to do stuff with. Like it's not
hmm
bad. Like he has stuff. And then like I said, Raiji Ludamon, like you kind of pointed out, just free protection is really good if you don't have decoy.
Yeah.
Like he just has the tools. It's just figuring out the combination that's going to be the real trick.
Dan
I think that's
Devimon.
just a similar thing with every deck, though, is figuring out the right
No, some
combination.
decks like I hate to say it, like Alliance, I think is still kind of just bad. Like and Dan Devimon is like actually piss awful.
Like there was the potential like that there could have been decent stuff, but the problem is that like they roped him into the same kind of like BS that Barbermon's on, and those are just mechanics that they're trying too hard not to break.
hmm
Because like as unfun it is for like your opponent to mill your cards out of your deck, it's even worse if they delinquent duo them out of your hand.
Yeah, to just
Yeah.
to force them to like I can't tell you how many times on Mirage I won the game because I sniped the proper card out of the opponent's hand.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah,
my
exactly.
opponent has told me multiple times in multiple different events like, "Oh, you hit the card that I needed."
Hmm.
I'm like, "Good. That's what I want to hear." Like so like
Yeah,
the funny thing is Mirage does what it's trying to do but better
yeah.
and in a
Like
less feels bad way.
yeah, because you had to force your opponent to be at like 8 or 9 cards, whereas this deck is like, oh, I gotta keep my opponent like
Real
at
low.
7 or more cards. But like for this strategy to actually ever be effective, like you would have to like be ripping cards out of their hands so that they have like 2 cards in hand or some like silly shit like that. Whereas like all of your effects turn into some like other nonsense if they're at like 5 or fewer cards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then so sometimes you're like, oh, I'd really like it if I could get the other effect that isn't the hand rip, but not that's not gonna happen. So
Yeah, and then Aquatics is just god awful. Like it still just does nothing. Like it seems like it has
It's
way
funny,
better.
but
Yeah,
it's about it.
Yeah, it's getting better. It's
The new
slowly
stuff
getting
is
better.
definitely good. Like, if the quality of the rest of the deck was the same as this new line, you'd have a pretty cool deck.
Right. Do you I know you've been experimenting with it. Do you actually run Aegis-Dramon or no?
Sorry. Go at that again.
I
Yeah,
know
you
you've been
blanked out
messing with the
there.
deck. Do you actually run Aegis-Dramon in it?
I was not. So when I built it, I did not play Aegis in it because even with the like increase to like Seedramon like being good, right, with the promo and the like base rush one from like 14,
Yeah.
like I didn't really feel that it was a great way to finish like
That's what
on
she
my
said.
guys. And I honestly felt that like this deck really needed the ace that we're not getting till December.
The level 7 ace?
Yeah, the level 7 Bond Ace, like,
Yeah,
I
that would
think
be
is a
real
lot
good.
better. Like, so this deck's biggest strength is the fact that, like, you can go from a, like, so you can go from, like, a single stack into, like, a fairly wide board, and then it can, like, kind of re-encompass itself, like, over and over again. So, like, you can go from, like, single stack to I have 3 guys on board, and one of them's, like, a level 5, and then I put a new guy, and then I can kind of, like, reincorporate, like, as needed. And then the fact that, like, you have, like, Russian blue is pretty decent. So, like, you have some of the better removal effects, right? Because your guys are doing more interesting things, like they're bouncing as opposed to other stuff.
Yeah.
So, like, there's enough, like, interesting stuff there that, like, you really could have done some really cool stuff, but, like, the rest of your pieces just aren't there. Like, even with the higher quality of Seedramons you have, like, the rest of your blue rookies are kind of whatever. Like, you have issues where, like, if you're using the Yokomon that the Bandai gave you, it's sometimes a little hard to like make full use of because you're constantly like removing a level 3 from your hand to like increase your sources to then play stuff. Like, and if you're not seeing the right ones where you're like, oh, I got to see the Goma that like I'm gonna play out now and I'm gonna get to draw 2 cards so that it fully replaces itself. Like, sometimes you can get into points where you're like, oh, I was doing what the deck wanted to do, but now I just don't have rookies to actually put in the back to keep kind of doing stuff if something happened to me.
Yeah.
I could see that. So I do think, yeah, and blue does have some really good tools. It's just like you said. I think the quality of the rest of the cards just aren't there to be able to make the deck good. And then the last deck we really haven't talked a whole lot about, just because it's not really worth our time talking about Alliance or going deeper into like Barbara or Dan Devi any more than we did.
So like Dan Devi's the only one that's a real deck right now because it has the old support pieces
Yeah, but it's
that let
so
you do it,
old.
but it's still not good because those pieces are so old and the quality of pieces you got this time around weren't very good because you got one of those dreaded rare megas.
Yeah, I
Like
mean
your
we've had
entire
some good
archetype
rare
is
megas.
yeah, recently we have, but like the fact that your entire archetype couldn't even be spared, like something higher than a rare, like goes to show you that they don't really consider you a real deck. Like Lilithmon and Barbara, they're waiting for their other halves to come out, so like can't really talk about them yet.
Yeah. But the last deck is the what everyone calls Journey to the West, but the Shakamon deck.
Hmm.
Like, I I don't know how to feel about the deck. Like, I feel like it's
Journey to
in.
the West is not really a deck per se. The
I mean, it
problem with it
is.
is
I just have zero experience with
I
how
tried it
this.
out for a while. Like I gave it like a week of testing and like iterating and stuff, and to be honest, like it really never did anything for me because like the deck wants you to build this cool big 15k body that gives everything minus attack, but then on your turns it flips your stuff. So like your weird gimmick is that like every once in a while you're like, oh, I'm gonna apply all the minuses to my own guy to then like do big damage.
hmm
But in the metas that I was playing in it, like and testing it out, it never did anything because this deck doesn't have protection. So you built this big, like 15k like dummy who like kind of doesn't do much because like all he's doing is like a blanket minus like I forget
Yeah,
what number
all
it is.
Digimon get -1 security attack until the end of the opponent's turn, which is pretty good because that could, like, Venusmon just shut out
Right, but it
certain
doesn't
plays.
do the real Venusmon thing.
Yeah,
Like, the
it's
actual
not
reason
actually
Venusmon is good.
yeah, it's not floodgating the opponent out of their abilities. They could still
Hmm.
do stuff. It's just they can't
Yeah, so
hit
half the
security
time
hard.
they would they would just do all their normal plays and then they'd out my guy, and what I would be left with was one guy plus another guy. Like, you get one Sensumon and you get to pick one of your other, like, Journey to the West characters.
Yeah,
So in
and the
most
heal
cases
is on the
it's Sagomon, because Sagomon is, like, arguably the best out of all of them. So you pick those two, and then your hope is that Sanzumon finds you the other guys or another Shakamon, so that you can make a new one. But, like, more often than not, you just didn't actually find it, so you couldn't do it.
Well, I mean, I've
Yeah.
seen them using red eggs and red low ends to be able to, like, let me do the Guilmon, draw 2 cards,
Yeah, uh-huh.
and let me use Ukamons to be able to dig them out, and Fireball for more card draw. So, like,
Yeah,
it
exactly.
has the flexibility of using different low ends. Like, you could probably find something in purple
Yeah,
to
since
break it
your
too.
entire deck is just, like, nothing but fives, and you're trying to, like, do funny cross plays.
Right.
Like, my big problem is that, like, not enough of your bodies are impactful enough. Like I said, the Sagomon I think is the best one, because, like, I don't know why they didn't give me a level 5 that costs 2 level 5s, like the ability to out a standard level 5, like a true level 5. Like, it kills 6Ks, which is, like, the lowest end of level 5s. Like, if it hits 7s or 8s, like, oh man, we'd be a real deck. Like, so it's
They'd be
Sagomon that's,
cooking.
like that's the only one that's actually decent. So it's they give them so they all give the minus security attack, but then it's if you crossed, you one of your opponent's Digimon or Tamers can't suspend until the end of their turn. So you can just
Yeah.
fully, like, shut off a Digimon, and it's not related to any, like levels or DP threshold. So, like, I don't know why this guy has to be I can only delete a 6K or less.
Yeah, Gokumon.
Yeah. And then the other one's a searcher, and then the other one makes something a blocker and gave it 3K. Like, cool, but, like, I didn't get protection, so, like, I could still just get outed. Like, so in most cases you're a 10K blocker and you gave something minus security 1. Like, realistically that didn't accomplish much.
Yeah, and because it's not using any aces, it's not really threatening anything.
Exactly. Like, so you're this cool level 5 deck, but, like, realistically the deck doesn't want you to use aces. So, like, in theory, for the entire deck, you could be playing cool stuff like Valk Ace or, like, any of the new, like, Angel Aces, like, because they all are the right colors. But the deck really doesn't want to reward that play style. Like, it just doesn't have a way to, like, help you recur out the pieces from trash, which is, I think, the biggest problem. Like, for this to be a cross deck that, like, kind of just doesn't have recursion. Like, we know that the cross style decks, like, are a big investment. So, like, the difference is, right. So, like, all the cross decks are like,
Yeah, they
oh,
have
we have
save and
save.
material save.
Exactly, so that, like,
Yeah.
you're really not losing out on much. But, like, the only other deck that ever saw success that was a cross deck was Dorbrick. But Dorbrick's whole thing was that, like, oh, you got to put so much stuff into it that you basically were OTKing. If you didn't OTK, then deck bad.
Yeah,
Basically.
And this deck realistically can't, like, OTK. Like, your big guy still costs way too much. Like, I think
and it doesn't have rush.
exactly he doesn't have rush. So, like, even if you could keep turn with him, you can't swing. So, like, what's the point?
I mean, I think that what they were trying to do is, like, yeah, you go into it and then ideally you'd pretend like it's Venusmon and it's gonna stick. But yeah, the reality is it just gets removed and source stripped and whatever and
Yeah.
bypassed. So, like, yeah, I
Yeah.
think there is just too many outs for it. Like, I think it's a cute idea, but I
I,
think it's
I
just
honestly can't fathom why he doesn't have some sort of protection. Like, even in lore, this is supposed to be, like, Buddha? So he should be, like, on the same tier as, like, Fanglong. Like, they should have been, like, another, like, Fanglong style guy. Like, could have had some kind of protection.
yeah,
Or,
I
like, at least
think
one
I
of them needed to give him that protection. Like, the fact that they all give you the same inheritable, which is when you
minus
attack,
security.
minus security attack. one. Like,
Yeah, the
it's so
idea is to
weird.
flip it. It's like I'm gonna stack my Digimon with security tech minuses, then I'm gonna flip it and I'm gonna punch all your security. But like,
Yeah,
it's like you said, it's just not good at doing it.
yeah.
So that's
Very
unfortunate.
disappointing because, like, honestly, it's like a really cool concept. Like, it's fun that Digimon even had these Journey to the West characters, and like that they actually got a real deck.
Yeah, it was funny. I was talking to my brother, and it's just like, oh, what Japanese story should they do next? And I was just like, well, this would be a really difficult one, but they could do the Parade of 100 Demons. And my brother's just like, that's not real Japanese lore. And I'm just like, no, it
Oh
is.
my.
Yeah. So my brother texted me this morning. He's just like, yeah, you were right. And I'm just like, of course I am.
The Parade of 100 Demons actually would be kind of an interesting concept if you think
I
about
think it would be a good token deck.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I honestly think if they did, they would probably do something similar to Diaboromon, where it's just constantly generating demon tokens. And that would be pretty fun. And you could do different things with the demon tokens based on whatever boss monsters you decide to do for whatever lore you're adapting from the story.
it.
So,
Well,
and they would
normally
have
in
to
the
be all
Parade
new
of 100
Digimon, though.
Demons, you would have to go with the 9 main demons that always appear in that, which would be the Tengu, the fucking cart, the I can't remember all of them. It's the Kitsune, the Tengu, the skeleton, the giant skeleton, the
Yeah,
cart.
they're the ones that all make up that
Yeah.
funny bad archetype in Yu-Gi-Oh.
That's only good in Duel Links, you mean?
The funny one that synchro climbs that like you can like.
Yeah, it's only good in Duel Links.
Okay.
Yeah, but
I,
regardless, I think that would be a pretty interesting like story for Digimon to create new Digimon around and adapt into the card game.
mhm.
I
Like,
But
agree on that, though.
there's definitely some cool stuff that like I'd really like to see Digimon do in the future. Like I was telling you guys the other day that like I really hope that Ghostmon becomes Noble Pumpkinmon because that's a mon that we haven't seen in the card game yet, which and is also just a cool guy. Like
yeah,
Pumpkinmon, I
he's
think is a pretty cool level 5 Digimon that just doesn't have enough like love in the card game right now. Like he has one okay printing, being the ST the one from the
14.
latest Garurumon, yeah,
Yeah.
ST14. But and then I also am just like the China exclusives are pretty cool. Like there's like
I actually want us to get some of those artworks that they're getting.
I'm
They just some of
trying to
them just
remember what
look
his name is.
We will
great,
eventually.
like
Uh
the freaking Cardinal, the Sovereigns.
yeah, there's some cool
Those
guys there.
alt arts are sweet looking.
There's yeah, but I'm talking about like some Digimon that are exclusive to like Japanese properties. There's like Xing Chen Mon, something like that, where I think he's a Chinese character that was like a super cool like general guy who then like got his head chopped off, but just was like, fuck it, and he just kept going. And so like he like became like a god. Like he's one of the like generals that like got sainthood and so are technically gods in like Chinese mythology
Yeah.
where like his gimmick is that he got his head knocked off and he just said fuck it and kept going. So like that could have been a really cool Digimon. like
Yeah,
and
like a
they've
Doulahan.
yeah, and they
That's
have him.
another
Like, he's
one.
in the data book. Like there's a couple of cool guys like that exist that we just haven't gotten yet. Like that's why I was very excited when we finally got Heavy Loader. Right, Heavy Loader had like one appearance right in Re-Rise,
Yeah.
and then we got him. So cool. So
Yeah, I mean,
hopefully,
there's obviously more that Digimon can do with the IP that it has and how to leverage it. But as far as
There,
like to round things and bring the conversation back on track to end things off, EX6, I think like I love the ideas that EX6 was playing with. It's just I feel like a lot of them were just half baked and undercooked and won't really have that much meta relevance as much as we want. Like obviously Ragnarlord, Dominimon, and Seven Great Demon Lords seems like they're the big winners. But they're big winners with the caveat of they still kind of just lose to some of the top decks. And some of their matchups only get worse literally one set
yeah,
later. So
mhm,
it's like, oof, that's kind of rough.
yeah, exactly.
yeah,
So,
but Demon Lord still has a chance
oh, Demon Lords has the
in the
most
upcoming
chance.
few sets. Because once we get Shoto, they can actually start turning
the
every
EX7
one of their stuff
into a blocker.
into blocker,
Yeah, like even
which
just like
gives them a lot more.
looking, yeah, just without like looking too far ahead, the majority of these decks don't even get support outside of like the indirect support for Demon Lords, obviously the memory boosts for Mastimon and Ragnalordmon, and then
And
we do get
Alliance
some.
technically also gets one eventually.
Yeah,
Makes me
but Alliance is
cry.
already barely even a deck, just because again the lack of protections thing is like huge. Like it's actually huge. It's like I could do 2 checks, I could get up into my boss monster really easily, and then I just die and I auto lose the game because I died, which sucks. But
That's still why I love Mastimon, because
Dimini,
even if I lose my boss monster, I'm just like, oh, cool, I can just rebound now.
yeah, and then Dimini gets some more angels in BT 18. I don't know if those will be good because Japan is experimenting with it, but like those seem like they're the big winners and the ones to kind of focus on in terms of like what's actually good out of the set. And I think this like EX sets, I have always said this, that they're generally supposed to be new player friendly sets, and this still seems to be kind of true, where there's a lot of cool things you could do, decks you could make out of it that are fairly easy to make.
Yeah.
It's just the result is their impact is designed to be lower than a BT set, and it's still true even in this.
I think the big issue though is that like even out of the box, like building Demon Lords, like if you just built it out of the EX6 set, I think you're not gonna have a good time. So like if you were only allowed, like if we were say like doing sealed, right? Like and we technically were just limited to the EX6 set, like Demon Lords in just EX6 alone, I think is not very great. Like, because some of your highest impact cards you just lose. Like, you need to already have invested in the Leviamons. Like, the Leviamon from
Yeah, the
EX5 has like
Leviamon,
been kind of
Leviamon
Problem
priceless
X.
for
with
his
the
entire life, basically, ever
with
since
sealed involving the sealed EX6, you're right, they lose a lot of it, but they still have stuff that can actually turn it around in some cases, like Lilithmon. Lilithmon is still a really good card coming out
he's
of
so
EX6, but the
slow.
problem with her is the fact that she does not synergize with the deck. She
She
synergizes with her
she
own
does
She
stuff.
does and she doesn't, because you're trying to have Gate delete the opponent's
delete
Digimon
her,
with her. And then you have
you
Sukai
just
that could
remove
try
her.
to act as your sniper for the rookies' floodgates. It's just, it is going to be moving significantly slower. I think sealed out of the set, like Ragnarlord obviously is the
Ragnar's
big
the
winner.
best. Like
Yeah.
you basically don't need too much more out of like it. Like you were gifted 2 full lines. You are just missing like a couple of like little funny pieces like
Yeah,
here or
just
there. And to be fair, like the cost for the cards that you are missing for the Ragnar set, like are the cheapest. Like you need the Durandamon and you need a Prywins from like the ST13 and you want like some Ragna BT3s as your off mega, like when you're not getting to do the big ace plays. And
yeah.
then like if you're playing any tamers, you're probably playing like ST15 tie. Like and that's like all you would need. Whereas like you kinda need some pricier pieces, like that Chaos Mode Lucimon, he's always held a pretty good price, like the old one.
He's about
So
17.
yeah, so like
For what?
not
Just
the
base art?
Yeah, base
yeah,
art Chaos Mode from the old set from BT7.
Jeez, that thing went up.
yeah. And so that's kind of like where I see it, like
I
where
mean, but Digimon's
those are the
not meant to
two
be a
main
sealed.
decks.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I was just saying,
Digimon's.
like, if you're brand new to the card game, like, and you
Yeah,
see
at
these,
least there's 2 decks
like,
that you could
that, those
build
are the kind of
towards.
hardest. Yeah, like that's kind of the problem for that. But like, they're the ones that you can straight kind of build out of this box, like the easiest. Like everybody else needs too many pieces from outside of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the hardest one to do with any of that is Mastimon, because none of her stuff is easily accessible now.
Well, I mean, ideally you
And
just get the starter deck and then her, and then you should have enough to have
if you can
barely
find the starter
something.
deck,
The starter deck's only like $13 online. It's not that bad.
Yeah, that's kind of why, like I was saying, like the Ragna starter deck's pretty cheap, so easy
Yeah.
peasy. But yeah, so I think the big takeaway for EX6 is that we kind of don't see it shaking up the meta too much. Like it's gonna get to stick around. Like we're gonna be in this BT16 EX6 meta a lot longer than we were in just the base 16 meta.
Yeah.
So there might be some iterations we can do, like the new, one of my big standout cards from this set is like we've been talking about that Raiju Ludamon. Just if you're a deck that like can stick a level 5 on board and maybe have some extra memory after you do that, to just slot in like generic protection, pretty good.
Then there's Ultimate Chaos Spawn. That card is like a really fun card to build around for the decks that kind of just want to like Mega Zoo, which there's a couple.
Yeah, and so lots of cool fun pieces. Like we're not dogging on the set. Like EX sets are always fun because they explore like an interesting space. But
They're generally lower power and hold
yeah,
very little relevancy, and they do that on purpose, which is why like this set being sold at this price is like absolutely mind-boggling because EX sets are always sold at a loss because they don't have any meta relevancy, or
yeah.
they generally have minimal. So we're going to be stuck with those 5 decks being the best 5 decks that we kind of highlighted earlier for probably the next couple whiles. Demon Lord seems like it could shake up the meta in terms of like the actual best thing out of EX6. And like from a casual perspective, there's just a lot of fun to be had out of the set. Like if your meta is like if your locals meta isn't super hardcore sweaty, like there is just a lot of fun to be had out of the set, and that's always fun and cool. So I think this is a good place to stop because otherwise we could go on forever. So I want to thank at this time everyone for listening to this episode of the podcast. If you enjoyed and want to help support the Cut Podcast, like I said earlier, do all of the social media doobly-doos and share it with others so that way, other people might be interested in hearing us blather about Digimon. And I want to thank everyone again for listening, and we will see you next time.